What's going on, fantasy owners? Week 1 is in the books for 2012. Hopefully your team did very well, came out on top. As for me, unfortunately, tough loss week 1, lost by only 11 points. I made a big mistake. I'm going to discuss that in this video to kick us off. This will be, how I'll do it is we're going to do these studs in one video, which is this one. And then we'll do the duds and kind of maybe tie in the injuries and that in the other video. So these are the guys that you want to either pick up off your waiver wire this week for week 2, or guys that you can rely on more. They had a better performance, maybe even a bounce back performance, hint, hint, as the season goes on. So I'm going to kick it off with the apology of the week, and I hope that this is not a recurring segment, but my apology goes out to the Atlanta Falcons. All the guys that I knocked in the season preview, consider me impressed. I don't think that's a song, but consider me impressed. You guys, I mean, granted, let's say this. The Falcons were playing the Chiefs week 1, and that exactly was a pretty juicy matchup. But if these guys, Matty Ice, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, who was in a CBS league, I think number 1, number 2 receiver for scoring for the week, Tony Gonzalez even. If these guys can do this on a consistent basis throughout the season, they're going to be must-start options for your team every week going forward. So again, I was not a believer based on what I'd seen in the past, but if any indication from this first game, like I said, it's only if they can do it consistently, but if they can do it that way throughout the season, then yeah, get them in your lineups. Start these guys with confidence until further notice going forward. The only concern I have still in Atlanta is Michael Turner. He was kind of a disappointment, but maybe that's a sign that they are starting to shut him down a little bit. He had 11 carries, he had most of the work, but only for 32 yards against the Chiefs. That's pretty surprising. Jacquizz Rodgers starting to be picked up in a number of leagues. In CBS leagues, he only went up 1%. But I think a lot of people are starting to buy into him a little bit. Again, I kind of like Jacquizz Rodgers going into the season as kind of a deep sleeper option. Watch the running back situation in Atlanta going forward, though. But big apologies to the Atlanta Falcon guys and Falcon fans and Falcon backers. Forgive me for those guys. I'm impressed after 1 week. Running backs to acquire this week. Obviously, the big name out there is Alfred Morris in Washington. He is the name that has come up a lot, kind of had a come-out-of-nowhere performance. 28 carries, got the bulk of the work. Not Evan Royster, not Roy Halou, but Alfred Morris, their 6th-round pick out of Florida Atlantic. 28 carries, 96 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But the big question with Morris is, can we really trust that he's going to be the guy going forward? We all know Mike Shanahan. He doesn't like fantasy football. He always, over the years, has tended to screw with fantasy owners, and not literally, but just figuratively, kind of mess with our mind. And one guy starts, the next guy starts. It's really confusing for us. But I think he tends to really like Tim Hightower. If he really likes a guy, he tends to really usually go with them unless they really let him down. I don't think this is going to happen with Morris. I have bought into this hype. At the very least, he should be on scout teams. He should at least, if you are needing running back depth, I think Morris is certainly a guy you can plug in. And he's got a juicy matchup this week, going up against St. Louis. The Rams defense is like Swiss cheese. There's tons of holes in it, and Detroit carved him up last week. So Alfred Morris is certainly a guy I like going forward. Certainly, maybe number 2, number 3 with definitely high upside. I think he should definitely be on rosters, and definitely maybe even worth a start this week against that Rams defense. The mistake that I made that cost me this week, and maybe several owners out there too. All right, let's say it. Raise your hand if you benched Adrian Peterson. I mean, I think most of us did, but we were told that the guy was either not going to play or was going to be very limited behind Toby Gerhart. That's what we heard all week long, and then at the last minute, he goes off like this. I mean, we were not expecting. This was a comeback out of nowhere for AP. 17 carries, 84 yards, and the 2 scores. Granted, they were within inside the 5-yard line, but still, a touchdown is a touchdown in fantasy football, and no matter how you get it, it counts for 6 points. So we were, Peterson owners were all blindsided if they, like a blindside tackle if they didn't start Peterson. So I think it happened to a lot of us, but the good thing is this performance only shows that we can trust AP all day going forward. And the matchup couldn't be more juicy this week either. Speaking of juicy matchups for AP, he's going against the Colts, who just got carved by Matt Forte and Michael Bush of Chicago last week. This is obviously, in fact, as far as to say as this could be the start of the week. You got to start all day against Indianapolis. Period. End of statement. It's a no doubter. He even made a quote, and I love this quote. He said, "My legs are loose, and I'm ready to carry the load." With confidence like that, there's no doubt in my mind. AP is definitely one of the safest bets next week. Gerhardt is now nothing more than a handcuff option, or at the very least shouldn't even be on rosters anymore, unless you are still worried about AP. After this performance, I'm not anymore. I'm definitely putting him in my starting lineup next week, and you should too. A couple other running backs, just to, these are guys that, I think have cemented themselves as number 1 backs. You should start these guys with confidence. DeMarco Murray, there's no issues about his health anymore. 20 carries for $131. He's the number 1 guy in Dallas. He's a solid number 1. You can start him going forward. Frank Gore of San Francisco, there was a lot of talk that, the guys behind him would steal from him, but Gore definitely showed that he's still the main guy. 16 carries for $112 and a touchdown. It's like Kendall Who, LaMichael Watt. I mean, these guys, right now are hardly there. I mean, Kendall Hunter is still being talked about as his backup guy, and he probably is. But for now, you should definitely start Gore with confidence unless he does get hurt again. He's had that injury risk in the past, but for now, you can rely on Frank Gore. Kevin Smith in Detroit, speaking of my Lions, he is now the main guy. 13 carries, 62 yards with a score. No sign of Javid Best, obviously no sign of Mikael LaShore. Start Kevin Smith with confidence. And Stevan Ridley in New England is another guy that has really come on. 21 carries for $125 with a score. He's the number 1 guy now that Ben Jarvis Green Ellis is gone. Start Stevan Ridley with confidence as well. On to the wideouts and tight ends. These guys, obviously the number 1 guy that, again, had that kind of come out of nowhere performance, Kevin Ogletree. I mean, this guy, the big question now is he the new Laurent Robinson in Dallas? To me, it certainly looks that way. Obviously, though, the main targets in Dallas, when they're healthy, are going to be your guys like Dez Bryant, Miles Austin, Jason Witten, even though he was coming off that injury last week. Those guys are going to be Tony Romo's main threats. But you really can't ignore this performance. 8 catches for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. And a great performance by Tony Romo and Dallas against the Giants. So, definitely he's worth adding a spot. If you need wide receiver depth, Ogletree is certainly a guy to add to your roster. But, the question is, will you be able to rely on him going forward with that loaded receiving core? For now, I see Ogletree as, a number 3 guy, but definitely with upside. Is he worth adding on rosters? Absolutely. Is he worth being on scout team? Sure. Just if you need the depth, because you don't know if this is going to be a continuous thing or if it's going to be, just maybe a one-hit wonder and you're done going forward. We've seen that a lot happen in fantasy football too, especially with guys in week 1. So remember Devery Henderson last year, 100 yards week 1, disappeared really the rest of the year, was really inconsistent, kind of the hair puller. Monitor Ogletree, but if you have the depth, there's no reason why you can't afford a roster spot on him. Another guy I like, and again, this is Kansas City, but it's kind of a deep shot, but a guy like Dexter McCluster. Dwayne Bowe is their main threat, obviously, but what if he's covered all the time? What if Kansas City's got tough defensive matchups where Dwayne Bowe's going to be snowed under and Matt Castle has to throw the ball to somebody else? So McCluster had 6 catches for 82 yards in his first week. It seems to me like he's entered as the clear number 2, and really Tony Moiaki, who's their tight end, is more of a goal line guy. I don't see him as being a big option for them. But I really like McCluster. For now, I see him as nothing more kind of a low-end number 3 kind of guy for you. But he's a guy that he's going to emerge as the season goes on. Maybe if you're desperate, if you need the wide receiver depth, if you put him on your bench maybe, and watch, see how he and Castle work together. I like Dexter McCluster going forward. Other guys to watch, obviously Miles Austin, as I mentioned, put aside all those fears about his hamstring. He looked strong, had a touchdown against Dallas. That kind of saved his fantasy day, but certainly still a strong starting option going forward. Pierre Garçon, in Washington, obviously working very well with RG3 in Washington. 4 catches for a $1.09 and that long score. Definitely, I really like him going forward. There was the concern with the foot, but I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be a solid number 2 going forward. He should be in your starting lineups from now on if he continues to develop that strong rapport with RG3. Lance Moore in New Orleans, he is benefiting greatly from the absence of, now that Meacham is gone in San Diego. I think he's cemented himself as the number 3. He's definitely leapfrogged the aforementioned Devery Henderson. He's obviously still behind Jimmy Graham and Marcus Colston, but you can't ignore 6 catches for a $1.20 and a score. I think he's a definite number 3 with upside going forward. Definitely Lance Moore, a guy you want to have in your lineups. A guy maybe to add this week also, Stephen Hill of the Jets, the rookie out of Georgia Tech. Had a nice debut, 5 catches for 89 yards with 2 touchdowns. The Jets offense looked strong in week 1. They did nothing in the preseason, but definitely a strong performance from Stephen Hill. I think maybe a strong number 2, number 3 going forward. Kind of watch if this, again, isn't a one-hit wonder thing, kind of like with Ogletree, but monitor it going forward and see what happens there. Jeremy Curley also had a touchdown, but I'm not sold on him just yet. He's way behind the depth chart. Ignore him. Stephen Hill's the guy you want to take a shot on if you're looking for a Jets receiver. Alshon Jeffrey of Chicago, he in all likelihood is probably owned in a lot of leagues. He was owned in my league. He was actually on the bench for my opponent this week, even though I lost. He went off for the Bears this week. 3 catches for 80 yards and a score, the rookie out of South Carolina. Someone's got to be the number 2 behind Brandon Marshall. I think Jeffrey could be it. Because Devin Hester and Johnny Knox didn't really shine that much this week. Treat him as maybe a number 3 with upside for the moment. If he's out there in your league, he might be already owned. Brandon LaFell of Carolina, I have him as my number 4 receiver right now, maybe debating number 3. He had a touchdown catch this week, 3 catches for 65 yards in that score. It does seem to cement him as the number 2 guy behind Steve Smith. For now, though, I'm not really fully sold on just making him a starter just yet. I still see him as number 3, number 4, but definitely with that upside for the touchdown catch. Randy Moss, I don't know if you really can count on him going forward. 4 catches, 47 yards, and a score, though, but that was really on broken coverage by Green Bay. He still was outperformed by Crabtree, as he should be. I think he still stands. He didn't really rise his production too much. Number 3 with upside. And quickly, a couple other guys. Kyle Rudolph in Minnesota was a tight end that I really liked going forward into the season. 5 catches, 67 yards. I really like him as a deep sleeper. I like him as a decent number 2 with some upside. If he's available in your league, definitely put a claim in on Kyle Rudolph. I think he's going to be getting some looks this year. Also, and I know this is another deep play, but in Indy, Reggie Wayne definitely looked like a strong number 2, number 3, had over 130 yards this week for the Colts. And Kobe Fleener also looked really strong. A low-end sleeper, but potential number 2 if you're desperate. All right, guys, those are my studs for the week at the running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Feel free to leave comments or questions below. As always, I love answering your guys' questions and comments with my thoughts. If you want guys to avoid this week, go to the Duds video. Good luck in week 2 this week. I hope to bounce back myself with a win, just like Adrian Peterson. Thank you, guys, and keep on watching, and go out there and keep winning. Thanks, guys.